sky today. Hey, I'ma dance on the clouds today and make it rain.
Hey there everybody, and welcome back. So, a lot of you know that there's really two versions of the old Flight Simulator X that lives on to this day. One of them is FSDreamTeam, which we see a lot of here on this channel, and the other one is P3D, which is the ESP version. It's primarily intended for commercial use, academic use, and professional use, and its developer is Lockheed Martin, the same folks who are the manufacturers of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. P3D has been widely used, even in the more consumer and entertainment industry, because a lot of folks like the eye candy that it provides. One of the things that has kind of been a caveat of that is that with the eye candy that it adds on, it can sometimes make the sim somewhat unstable. In fact, a lot of you have seen my FSDreamTeam edition versus P3D version 2.5 side-by-side video, where even with the settings turned down, P3D was not as efficient with virtual address space or VAS, and thus resulted in an out-of-memory error. So for a lot of folks, it's been a trade-off between turning down the settings that made the simulator look very pretty to keep it stable, especially when you start adding in a lot of add-on aircraft. Well, Lockheed Martin has listened to their customers, and they've decided to update P3D to P3D version 3. Now, it is a brand new purchase. It is not an incremental update, and although it looks the same on the surface, there's quite a bit of work that has gone on behind the scenes to make it a more stable simulator that so many of the previous customers had demanded. So we're going to look at that exactly here today. First of all, let's go ahead and launch P3D version 3. Now, as you guys can see, I'm using the professional version. It costs around $200 in the US. If you add to that another PMDG aircraft or something like that, the price can go up pretty quickly. But once again, if you're using it for the right purposes, it's a relatively decent cost for flight training at home versus having to spend time in a real aircraft. So let's go ahead and just load up the default flight to start with, and let's talk about some of the changes. So I'm going to go through a kind of abbreviated version of the changelog. The changelog is very, very large, and I'll be sure to link it down below. But there's quite a few things that I think the majority of simulator users out there would really be interested in. First of all, there's a really cool thing called avatar mode, and we'll be going into that in just a moment. The avatar mode is a fully controllable biped, basically an animated person, that allows both first and third person views. These can be useful for things like aircraft walkarounds or just exploring a scenery. These avatars also have third-party support, so technically a developer could make a avatar that looks like you, or make an avatar that looks like a pilot or a fighter pilot or a fireman or whatever it may be. Also, the ATC window is now transparent. One of the things that a lot of folks had asked for was the old FSX style transparent window, because in the original P3D it was a solid ATC window, and obviously it can obstruct a lot of the view when it's open. But now you can see, although it's still a little bit distracting, you can see for the most part, you can see right through it, and it makes it a heck of a lot nicer to have in your cockpit as opposed to the solid one. Some of the other major changes is for people who are still using Windows 8 or 8.1. They have fixed the controller and joystick dropping issues with Windows 8.1. Now, looking to the future of flight simulation, it also has built-in organic Oculus Rift VR headset compatibility. It's integrated into the core. So if you have a Oculus Rift dev kit, you could technically plug it in and it appear in the camera mode list once connected. Also, the platform now supports speed tree, which we'll be talking about in just a moment, but basically these are high quality 3D trees that actually you may have seen in some other games. that also allow for wind animations and smooth LOD transitions. There have been 2 new aircraft added, which is the Sikorsky H-60 Blackhawk, as well as the F-35A, also known as the Lightning II, which is a new Joint Strike Fighter, and it's made by India Alpha Foxtrot Echo. They also changed the way the HDR looks to increase the default brightness and enhance color clarity. Now, you can actually change this on the fly as well, which we'll be playing with in just a moment. But it's a fully dynamic and real-time HDR lighting engine. They fixed some of the issues with water reflections that were affected by secondary views. They fixed an issue where certain clouds would disappear at certain camera angles while on the ground. They fixed a bug with wave animations and wind offsets. Optimized the particle system by better utilizing GPU and system resources by reducing CPU side workload and supporting indirect draw calls and improving sorting algorithms. I know that's a lot, but basically what it should mean is that the old CPU intensive FSX ways that ESP had kind of inherently adopted should be somewhat improved by offloading some of those draw calls to the GPU, which should result in faster rendering and possibly even better performance. Also fixed a bug where batch scenery objects would flicker across multiple GPUs. Basically, if you're using SLI, sometimes you would get some weird anomalies. In fact, you'll be seeing that in our side-by-side comparison, but that should also be fixed. Now, the big point that I think a lot of people are looking to P3D version 3 for, especially since it has to be repurchased, is that Lockheed Martin put in the fix notes, or I guess I should say the release notes, that it improved memory management, reducing overall VAS usage and spikes. Along with that, they optimized the texture unloading during loads. So in other words, if you're switching from one airport to the other, and also made sure that unused terrain details were no longer loaded. So as you're passing over, let's say, multiple high detail airports on a long haul in a PMDG 777, all of these old assets should now be unloaded and should result in a more stable sim and better VAS usage. So we're going to get to test some of those things here in just a minute, but while we're here at the default airport, let's go ahead and take a look at 2 of the improvements, or 2 of the additions, which is avatar and speed trees. So first of all, to use the avatar mode, it's very simple. If you have your default keys mapped, you just hit Control-Shift-E, and there we are. We're in our avatar. Now actually here on my lap, I actually have a Xbox One controller. And the Xbox One controller, without having to map any new keys, works automatically with avatar mode. So I can use the left thumbstick to move him left and right, make him go back, make him go forward. I can use the right thumbstick to pan around him. I can also use the B key to make him crouch or stand up. I can use the A key to make him walk or run. And I can also use the X key to make him jump. It almost feels like playing Halo, to be honest with you. But it's cool for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think one of the ones that most people think about immediately is that you can actually change the views on this guy. Now, obviously, we're in third person right now. We can also go to first person attached. Now, this is my least favorite of all the views. As you can see when I walk around, it's very jerky and kind of awkward, and to be honest with you, makes me a little bit nauseous. But when you look down, you can see his body, his pants, and his cool shirt. You can see his shadow right there, because he's still being rendered, and basically you're taking on a point of view from his little bobbly head. Also when he crouches, you can see that, and when he jumps, you can see that as well. So a little bit uncomfortable. The view that I prefer is the first person with no model, and as you can see, the model has completely disappeared. Instead, it's a little bit more of a smooth camera experience. I still have all the controls, and what I could basically do is walk up to an aircraft and I could inspect it or do a walk around if I'd like. Now, the way that it works right now is not exactly perfect. As you can see, I can't really get underneath the wing of this, and in fact, even if I try to crouch, and we'll go to the third person view for this, even if I try to crouch, it looks as though I'm clearing the wing, but I still hit that invisible wall and get pushed back. Also, if I try to come over here and let's say get closer to the cockpit, same thing, I hit a kind of invisible wall here. So it's not exactly perfect, but I'm sure that as aircraft developers get used to this feature, it's possible they may make it a little bit easier to integrate into their aircraft. If I ever wanted to exit avatar mode, I just hit the Y key and I go right back into my cockpit. So next up, let's take a look at what speed trees is all about. Now, speed trees is actually an old technology. It's been around for some time. In fact, Microsoft Flight, the last Asus studio built flight simulator, actually used speed trees. Speed trees are made by Interactive Data Visualization Inc., and they basically develop software products that focus on 3D game developers who need assets in their programs. Speed trees have been used in engines such as Unity, Unreal Engine 4, and for those of you guys who may have played the old game called Trains, that also utilized speed trees. Now, if you did play Trains, you know that speed trees, when you turn them on and you turn them up, are very, very performance intensive. So you should not expect to see the entire world modeled in speed trees, but possibly some foliage around a helicopter landing pad, for example, or trees around a little bush strip may have speed trees integrated into them in the future, as I know Orbx intends to do, and that could just add to some of the immersion. You guys can see some of the speed trees here now. Now the ones off there in the distance, they aren't moving. Those are the regular tree sprites. But these ones you can obviously see are animated. They definitely look far more detailed. If winds are calm, or actually if winds are completely still, they don't move at all. But right now, if we take a look, winds are at 10 knots, and you can see some of the trees are moving a little bit more than I probably would expect a tree to move in 10-knot winds, especially this one right here. I mean, the thing looks like it's more like in 20-knot winds, but I'm not sure if that's something that can be adjusted or kind of fine-tuned, but still cool nonetheless to see animated trees, even though their animations may not be completely perfect. Great. Now, last but not least, let's take a look at what the HDR lighting is all about. So if we go to Options, we go to Settings, we can go to Display, we can go to Lighting, and we can adjust the HDR lighting on the fly. Now, a lot of folks may have previously used things such as SweetFX or some sort of ENB injector to get the right kind of HDR lighting that they wanted, but 95% of it can now be done just here organically in the sim. So for example, if I wanted to give my sim a kind of, I guess, Wright Brothers look, make it kind of vintage looking, I can take my saturation and drop it down to 0. And in real time, you can see that my sim has pretty much completely changed. Of course, I could also oversaturate it if I wished. So let's see what that looks like. And now it looks like Skyrim or something. But anyways, you guys get the idea. So it's pretty cool that you can kind of on the fly adjust your HDR lighting elements without having to fiddle with a unstable injector. Personally, I don't really use ENB mods, but for those of you guys who are kind of ENB junkies, you guys can adjust bloom, brightness, and even saturation. Alright, so now that we've looked at all that, let's go ahead and jump on into the benchmarks. Now, real quickly, before we actually get into the benchmarks, I have a quick edit that just came across my desk. Some of you guys may be familiar with my FS Cubed scenery restore backup tool video that I did in early September. Now, today you'll see me flying in Orbx's Northern California, and it's fully functional. But the only reason I was able to do that is by reaching out to some of my developer friends and begging them to help me migrate some of the stuff over. It's daunting. I would not recommend it unless you are extremely proficient in the folder structure of P3D version 2.5 and version 3. So the good news is that the SDG guys have figured out how to do it for you in an easy way in just a couple of clicks. So you know, when you buy FS Cube from SDG, you get three things. You get a FSX tool, a P3D version 2.5 tool, and now you get a version 3. So what you would do is you would take a regular old snapshot, just like you saw me do in the video using FSX Steam. You would take a snapshot of your 2.5, and then you would open up the version 3 tool, and you would simply restore that snapshot. So basically what you would do is that you would go and browse for your version 2.5 source, and then you would restore the snapshot using the version 3 tool, and it will fully migrate your scenery files using the appropriate folder structure over to version 3. So I know a lot of people are worried about how is it that I'm going to migrate my sceneries, do I have to wait for somebody to come out with an installer, how long is that going to take, etc., etc. The good news is the SDG guys have already figured it out 24 hours after P3D came out, and as you guys saw in my previous video, it backs up your scenery in totality with the exception of FSDT or Flightbeam airports, but the good news is those are already V3 compatible, and it just saves you the extremely difficult task of having to port over stuff manually. So either wait for the developers to come out with their own installers or use FS Cubed. So just want to share that with the community. I'm not paid or compensated by these guys, I just love the tool. So anyways, let's get into the real benchmarks now. Alright, so we're into our benchmarks now. So I'll let you guys take a look at the settings. Long story short, I put them at levels that I would never dream of making a long haul flight, or really any flight for that matter, using 2.5. But I also didn't want to max them out because frankly 2.5 wouldn't even have been able to make it off the ground. So instead I cranked cloud shadows up, I think to about 18 miles or so, 2560 by 1440, 8-time MSAA, 16-time anisotropic filtering, FXAA on 50% air traffic density, I should say, using my World of AI installers that I got over, which are extremely demanding, it's definitely a tough benchmark. Now I'm not going to draw a conclusion for you. I'll let you guys see the VAS and see the frame rates, and you can draw your own conclusion. As you guys know, I don't really like to put my opinion into too many things. The thing I would say as you're watching this is that version 3 may look a little bit overexposed, and I do feel that way as well. It's because I did not touch the HDR settings that it comes with the changes that they made to HDR. It tends to be a little bit, I think, on the oversaturated side just out of the box, but of course, as I showed you guys already, you can adjust that to your liking. Just so you guys know what we're looking at today, we're flying from KOAK, a straight out departure. We're going to be making a 180 to catch the Archie transition to Flightbeam's absolutely beautiful KSFO. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for KSFO HD, I don't think version 2.5 would have even been able to come within view distance of another airport. But KSFO HD just runs extremely well, so it was able to let 2.5 get a little bit further than it probably should have. We're flying over Orbx's Northern California using the default clouds and default sky textures, using the building storms theme, and we're flying the PMDG 737, of course. We're also using GSX down on the ground with ground traffic density maxed out. So although we won't actually be making it to the gate for a reason that you'll see, just know that that's an extra strain on the system as well. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the side-by-side benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, well, there you have it. So, of course, the result was somewhat expected out of 2.5, but I think that what's really kind of refreshingly, I guess I would say encouraging about 3.0 is the fact that we've made it this far and we still have about 5 or 600 megabytes of overhead remaining. Now, of course, things like Active Sky Next may chip away at that, as well as some Rex textures for the sky, but it'd be pretty hard to deplete an extra 600 gigabytes considering that we're already running at pretty, top of the line, extremely high settings that I think are more than enough for a practical user. The closer we get to the airport, the VAS stays pretty much consistent. And as we get a little bit closer, you'll see that we'll get a couple of little stutters here and there, and that's primarily because of all the GSX assets loading, so all the little tow trucks and airport vehicles and stuff like that. But definitely well within acceptable limits, and you're not seeing any real micro stuttering from the sim itself the way that sometimes you used to. As you guys may have noticed in the video, there were a lot of artifacts from 2.5, and that's because we're using SLI, and that was also one of the big fixes, was improved SLI support. Now, the frame rates stay extremely consistent at around 19 or 20 frames per second, which I know doesn't sound necessarily amazing, but for flight simulation, it's not a first-person shooter. 20 frames per second for us feels relatively fluid, and I'm pretty happy with the result. Now I'm going to be doing this landing manually, disconnecting autopilot, and I am still using an Xbox 360 controller, so excuse my wobbles here. But overall, I have to say it's pretty great. It's pretty great. I think that the improvements over 2.5 are significant. Now I know there's a lot of controversy out there about, is it worth another $200 if you're buying the professional version, or $60 if you qualify for the academic version. And I'm not going to tell you what is valuable to you enough. It is a high-end simulator, although it looks like FSX to a certain extent. It has more capabilities using SimDirector and all these other tools that more than likely professional users would find more value in than just flying around. Of course, also people know that making a transition from FSX to this means you have to buy some planes over again. Real Air and PMDG are the ones that come to mind immediately, but there may be some more out there. And once again, that's all a value proposition you have to make for yourself. But if you're an existing P3D user, I think that the evidence of the improvements is definitely here. Whether or not, once again, those improvements are valuable enough to you to make the transition is something you got to decide for yourself. So we're taxiing on over to the gate here. Had every intention of using GSX. Actually, once when I used GSX trying to come up to a gate in one of my prior tests, I actually got a crash. The sim just froze. It was not an out-of-memory error, but the sim just froze and kind of quit on me. Of course, this thing is, only 24 hours old at this point, so I'm sure those little things will be worked out, and it may have even been just an anomaly. But just something I did want to note is that, in all my testing, I did get 2 crashes. But for the most part, it's a very consistent, very stable sim. So here we are trying to make our attempt to get to the gate, and we got our video cut short. So hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments or questions down below, and until next time, take care.